Dividing decimals. So before we begin with our examples, let's go over a few rules. So the first rule is we don't want any decimals in the front number. So the divisor is the number that is out in the front. That's on the left of the division symbol. Then what we have inside of the division symbol is the dividend. And then lastly, our solution is also known as the quotient. Now, if we have a decimal in the divisor right here, we're going to move the decimal in both the divisor and the dividend. If we run out of digits, you can add zeros. And after dividing, we move the decimal straight up. Now, all of this will make more sense when we go over an example. Example 1. Jonathan has a very busy day in the shop. To plan accordingly to see how much he can get done, he starts to do some estimates for each job. One of the jobs is to recondition the valves on an 8-cylinder engine. He estimates it will take him 220 minutes for the whole job. How many minutes does it take to recondition the valves on each cylinder? So for this problem, we can see that we are going to have a division problem. So we have 220. This will be our dividend, and we're going to divide it by 8, which is also known as our divisor. So like this, we don't have any decimals yet, but we will. So we'll kind of see how this works into it. So now we have 8, and we look at this number to see how many times 8 can go into 2, which it's 0 times. So now we look at the first 2 digits. Now 8 can go into 22 2 times. So 8 times 2 is 16. And then we're going to subtract. So we can't take 2 minus 6. We'll have to borrow. So now that 2 becomes a 12. So 12 minus 6 is 6. 1 minus 1 is 0. Then the next step will be to bring down that 0. And then we ask, 8 can go into 60 how many times? And 8 can go into it 7 times. Because 8 times 7 is 56. So it's pretty close to 60. So now we go 60 minus 56, which 0 minus 6 can't be done, so we need to borrow. 10 minus 6 is 4. Now this is where we need to add the zeros and a decimal. So 220, which right there's a decimal. And then anything we can do after will be zeros. And the only reason why we put a decimal there is because that's where it is in this problem. And we don't have to move it because we don't have to move it in our divisor here. So now we take this 0 and we're going to bring it down. So now we have 40. Now 8 can go into 40 5 times. 8 times 5 is 40. And we will subtract and we get 0. Now we come back up to our problem, which is called right here on the top, which is called our quotient. And we're going to bring that decimal straight up from where it's at. How many minutes does it take? It takes 27.5 minutes for each cylinder. And that would be our solution. So let's do another example. Here we have this problem here. So we're going to set this up. So we have 3.2 goes into 50.7744. Now, we never want to have a decimal in our divisor. So what we do is we move it to the right one. And since we move this number to the right one, we also have to do that to our dividend. Just like that. So we place it right there. So now we have 32 in the front, and then we have 507.744. So now we can start dividing. Now 32, can it go into 5? No, because 5 is much smaller. But 32 can go into 50 one time. So 32 times 1 is 32, and then we're going to subtract. We borrow from the 5, place that whole 10, so now it just becomes 10. And then we have 10 minus 2, which is 8. 4 minus 3 is 1. Now the next step will be to bring down that 7. So now we have 32 going into 187. Now 32, let's do a couple of multiplications. Let's look at 4. So 2 times 4 is 8. 3 times 4 is 12. So let's try another number. Let's go up one more number. So 2 times 5 is 10. Carry the 1. 3 times 5 is 15 plus 1, 16. So that's pretty close to 187. Because 32 times 6, as we will see, 2 times 6 is 12. Bring the 1. 3 times 6 is 18 plus that 1. So that's 192. So 6 is too large. So let's go with the 5. Because 192 is larger than 187. So we need to take this 5. So I'll put a 5 right there. So 32 times 5 is 160. Now we'll subtract. 7 minus 0 is 7. 8 minus 6 is 2. Then the next step will be to bring down the next 7. So now we have 32 going into 277. So here we have 32 times 6 equals 192. So let's do 32 times 8 and see where that ends up. 2 times 8 is 16. Carry that 1. 3 times 8 is 24 plus 1 is 256. So now we go, 32 can go into 277 8 times. Because if we do another one, I think it'll be way too large because 32 plus 56 will be past the 80s or in the 80s, 280. So now we have this subtraction. 7 minus 6 is 1. 7 minus 2 is 7 minus 5 is 2. Now we bring down that 4. So 32 can go into 214. Let's look at 7. 2 times 7 is 14. Carry the 1. 3 times 7 is 21. Plus 1 is 2. So it's 224. So we looks like we need to go with the 6 here on this next one. Because 224 is larger than 214. So we do the 6. So 32 times 6 is equal to 192. We place that right there. And now we need to subtract. 4 minus 2 is 2. 1 minus 9 can't be done, so we borrow. 11 minus 9 is 2. And then what we do is our final thing is we'll bring down the next 4. And we see that this is perfect. We have a 7 here, which equals 224 when we multiply. So we put a 7 above. So 32 times 7 is 224. We subtract and we get 0. So now we go back to our problem as we are done dividing, and we need to bring that decimal straight up. Now we move that decimal over to the other 7, to the right of that first 7. So what we do is we're going to bring that decimal straight up and make it equal to 15.867, and that would be our solution.